Did Thomas Crapper really invent the toilet? How did Soviet era famines give us Tony the Tiger? How did Sigmund Freud's nephew use bananas to start a 36-year civil war? You can learn all about these and hundreds of stories in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description.
Yeah, so are you an atheist fully? Are you agnostic? Where are you coming from?
I would call myself both.
Both, okay. So you consider the idea of non-existence after the physical form?
I wouldn't say that that's not what I mean by atheism. I mean, I don't believe in any God.
Okay, so what happens after the physical life? Is there existence or non-existence?
There's a universe and it existed before I did and it'll continue existing after I do.
What about that individual's perspective?
So does my consciousness keep existing after I die? I don't think so.
So non-existence. You stop existing fully. You have no awareness to anything.
Right.
Okay, so that's non-existence for that individual. They cease to exist.
So for them, so like if I don't know, if I have a book and I burn it, the book doesn't exist anymore. The things that the book was made of continue existing in a different form, but you will no longer be able to read the pages. After I die, I won't be able to know that I'm dead. But to say that means that nothing exists. Well, things are different now, but
okay, so we'll branch off and I'll loop back to what I was pointing at. So thank you for giving that. Great example. So physics demonstrates to us that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It'll just change its state.
Sure.
Now, in order to manipulate energy, you need to be on a synonymous frequency. In other words, you have a radio and a radio wave. You have to break the radio for that physical form of existence to stop functioning. But it doesn't mean that the radio wave stops functioning. It's a different state of energy, and that continues to exist.
Sure, like when I die, all of the energy, like I am creating brainwaves right now, and we've created machines that can read them. If I got shot in the head, I would die instantly, I would hope, but my brainwaves are still out in the universe. So in the most bizarre sort of sense, you could theoretically reconstruct the thoughts that I was having if you could perfectly capture them in some sort of weird way. I don't know if that's what you meant, but
brain waves are exclusive to the brain. We can measure those. We can measure synapses. We can measure the brain fully, but we cannot measure a thought separately from those neurons firing.
Well, they come from them, yes, but I mean, brain waves.
So the thought comes after the neurons firing?
Yeah. Or you could in a way say that they're simultaneous. I'm just saying that there are brain waves. So the machine is detecting the waves. I don't know what frequency they are. I would guess radio waves, but
when you have a thought, then the neurons fire in relationship to that thought. There's a sequence. The thought comes first, the memory comes first. That's produced actively within the brain, and we're able to measure that from these patterns of these neurons firing.
Completely disagree.
There's a sequence there. There's steps. There's series to this.
Yeah, completely disagree. You do not have thoughts before the neurons fire.
Okay.
I don't know if that's some sort of weird sort of like a mind-body dualism perspective, but no, I don't believe in that at all.
So you're measuring somebody's brain, and you are saying that the brain waves come before the thought.
No, I thought that's what you were saying.
Okay, so no, I said that the thought comes first, then the brain waves.
Well, you were saying that the thought induces the neurochemical activity to construct the memory or whatever. That's what I thought you said. I mean, I might have misheard you.
So the thought comes first in the brain waves. We good there?
Again, I don't know what you mean by thought. So I think the brainwaves and the thought here are basically like the same thing to me, but they are produced from a physical state. Brain states produce mental states.
Okay, so Are you good with the thought comes first? As the thought becomes active in the brain, then the neurons are firing.
No, because you can't have a thought without being the neurons are what generate all of the things that our brain does are generated from. See, now we're back to what I thought you said earlier. You can't think about something before the what do you call it? When something gets implanted in your brain, we call that integration. You can't think of something before the neural network that codes for whatever that thing is has been activated.
Okay, so how do we measure a memory if that memory is not active within the brain? Where does the memory go?
Again, so if by memory you mean when I think of my mom's face, is that stored somewhere in there? There's a roadmap, we can call it, like for if we just want to use like easy terms or whatever. I'm a big fan of that. There's a roadmap in the brain for experiences that you've had in your life. Some people have this crazy condition, I always forget the name, where they literally are incapable of forgetting anything that's ever happened. They can recall it instantaneously, what they were wearing and what they ate on January 3rd, 1992, right? So that tells us that it's in there everywhere for everybody, but the vast majority of people just don't have access to it like they do.
Yeah. So it's in there somewhere. We can't measure it in its somewhere state within the brain. We can measure it once it becomes active in the brain.
Thoughts and memories? Yeah, I mean, you can, this is how, like, they built that machine where, it can predict, are you going to push the button on the left or the right before you actually do it? Because it can read your brain waves and it can kind of tell what you're thinking that way.
So, yes, okay. So the thought or the memory is existing in a metaphysical state. And then once something triggers that thought or memory to come up and be active in the brain physically, then we're able to measure it.
Say it again. I just want to be super clear.
The thought or the memory exists in a metaphysical state. And then when it goes into the brain actively, we can measure that.
I don't even know what that means. I would just say there are
Neurons start firing and that memory is active, then we can measure it.
Approximately, yeah. I mean, that sounds kind of reasonable. When you said it's in a metaphysical state, that just sounds like mumbo jumbo, though.
No, there's a difference between metaphysical and physical. If we have to go to distinguishing terms, we can. But you're good between the difference between a table and a thought, right? One's metaphysical, one's physical.
Well, I would say we don't know what thoughts are. So to call them metaphysical, I think is you're giving yourself a massive burden by saying that. To say that thoughts aren't physical. Now, I don't claim to know what they are. Consciousness is like the most mysterious thing, but I do stand by the claim that everything we know about brain states is that mental states is that they derive from brain states.
Did you just insinuate there's not any difference between a thought and a table?
No, I didn't say that at all. I said I don't know what thoughts are.
But clearly they're different. Would it be fair to classify one as physical, one as metaphysical? Is that fair?
No.
Okay, why not?
Well, I'm just not convinced of that. You'd have to give me an argument for it. But what I would say, my short answer to that would be to claim that thoughts are non-physical. You'd have to explain what it is they're composed of and how it is, and explain the fact that we know that mental states and thoughts can be induced by physically changing brain states. To me, that supports what I said earlier, which was everything we know about thoughts and states of mind are that they are derived from brain states, which would make them physical. It's like energy is physical because energy, like physical things, release energy into the environment, so energy is not composed of matter, but that's not what non-physical means.
I didn't say non-physical. I said metaphysical.
Okay, so what's the difference between something that's metaphysical and non-physical?
I can touch the table, I can't touch a thought.
Yeah, that's non-physical.
You're classifying it as non-physical. I'm saying metaphysical. Do you want to use non-physical? We can use that.
I'm just telling you that when you say that, that's the same thing that I meant.
Okay, so do we call it non-physical then a thought? Is that okay? What do you want to call this? Just give me a term.
You can call it metaphysical if you want, But what I'm telling you is that when you say metaphysical, you're implying that it's non-physical, and I think we agree on that. But I'm telling you that just you're giving yourself a really massive burden, but I don't think you really have any evidence to support that.
You had an issue with how I created a distinction between a table and a thought. So how do you want me to define this? What term will make you happy?
I just said I don't have any problem with your term. I just think that you're not going to be able to justify it.
I haven't even tried, and your mind's made up.
Well, I explained to you the issues with claiming that mental states are non-physical. So you're welcome to, so far you've just claimed it. You haven't tried to support it. I mean, go ahead. I'm just trying to like figure out like what terms we agree on to make sure we're not talking past each other. That's all.
I agree wholeheartedly. That's why I want to understand what term is okay with you. So, so thoughts are metaphysical things. Tables are physical things. But going back to what I was trying to address in regards to the consistency of what the science demonstrates to us, that these metaphysical thoughts, when they're not active in the brain, we cannot measure them. They're existing in some form of state that we're not fully aware of what it is. We just call it consciousness.
So you're saying that we can, like through electroshock or whatever, we can induce a memory in somebody. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
We can, yeah. We can apply external stimulus to stimulate a pre-existing thought or memory.
Sure. And do you agree, like, with it? It seems pretty reasonable because we know people that have that condition, that everything we experience, our brain records it in some sort of way, right?
Yeah, everything is being recorded, whether we're aware of that fully or not.
So where's the non-physicality then? Because if it's physically in the brain and it can be induced physically, then all you're doing is basically calling to order that mental map or neural map or whatever in the brain. And then we have the thought. Now, I agree, again, the thought, what consciousness is, what it is when I see things, even when I close my eyes, I can see things. I can induce the same, like I can hear your voice, even if you're not talking. And I don't know what that is, right? But to say that the memory is non-physical, that needs some justification.
That's why I said metaphysical.
Yeah, I know. Non-physical, metaphysical. So that needs some justification.
There's a difference between the two. I'm considering it physical. It's just a different state of physical. Just like there's a difference between solid, liquid, gas. We define them differently for a reason. We classify them.
See, to me, I thought that if you were saying, first of all, I thought we agreed that metaphysical and non-physical were basically the same thing, but metaphysical means that it goes beyond the physical.
I said, however you want to create a terminology for this and categorize this, we can, just so we're on the same page. But there's a difference between metaphysical and non-physical.
Doesn't metaphysical imply that it is not physical?
You can prospectively create that implication, but I'm not.
Okay, so what does it mean to be metaphysical? Because I was under the impression that it's not.
State of the property comparatively from one to another. Solid, liquid, gas. We define them differently because they're physical. They're just in different states of physicality.
So you're saying, oh, sorry. So you're saying that ice is physical, but to call it, classifying it as a solid, that's a metaphysical description of water?
That is a solid form of water. Liquid is another form. Gas is another form. These are
yeah, I know, but calling it solid is metaphysical. I'm just trying to understand what you mean.
Calling it solid is physical.